Former British ambassador to Syria, Peter Ford, you're very welcome once again to the show. The United Kingdom has backed the missile strike, calling it an appropriate response to the alleged chemical attack. The question is now, of course, what happens if it is established after an investigation, which we're waiting on, that the Syrian government was not responsible for that attack?
Well, this statement is obviously self-contradictory. If it's only an alleged chemical attack, then the strike by the Americans can't possibly be justified. They have delivered the verdict before deliberating on the evidence, and what needs to have happened and may yet happen is a proper UN investigation. But the damage is done, and not just the immediate damage to the airport, which, by the way, was being used in the fight against ISIS, but what Trump's stupid action has done is make it more likely that chemical weapons will be used. Why? Because if you were a jihadi, would you not be jubilant this morning? Would you not be planning false flag operations to make sure that more American involvement was brought on Assad's head? Of course you would. And jihadis have already mounted false flag operations with chlorine. This is documented in a UN report from last August. So it's only too foreseeable that more use of chemical weapons will be made.
Another aspect just related to that, I suppose, is would the Assad government actually risk hitting civilians with a banned chemical when they're under such intense scrutiny? The eyes of the world, of course, on the country for some time. It happened in an area that perhaps was not as regionally important as other areas. So it begs the question that why would they actually carry out such an attack?
It beggars belief. They had absolutely zero motive for doing it, and 100 reasons not to do it. Only days before Trump had put out an olive branch in their direction. Is it credible at all that Assad would respond with a two-finger gesture? It's literally incredible. And what's really going on here is that we're all being manipulated by the jihadis and their backers. They are jubilant this morning because they're using us, they're jerking our leash, and we've totally forgotten the lessons of Iraq. Remember the dodgy dossier? Remember how certain the British and American intelligence agencies were that Saddam had weapons of mass destruction, that he had sarin, indeed. Turned out to be false, utterly false. And we're like a dog returning to its own vomit.
Russia's foreign ministry reacted within the past hour, claiming that Washington's decision to attack Syria was made before the chemical attack in Idlib, and that it's now being used as a pretext for force. That leads to another question: is this a one-off strike? Will the US expand its involvement? There are a lot of variables here, but that is a situation now that we're just not sure of.
Well, this is the really scary thing, that Trump has allowed the security state in America to box him into a corner. He's now put himself into a position where if he doesn't respond to the next staged incident, then he really will look like a Russian patsy. So this is why I believe that the risks have just increased exponentially. And Britain is likely, as usual, to be dragged in on American tails on what, may I call it, trumped-up charges.
A lot of geopolitical allegations as well, Peter, being thrown into the mix here. For instance, the US ambassador to the UN claimed that Russia and Iran do not want peace in the region. We can take a listen to this if we can now.
There is an obvious truth here that must be spoken. The truth is that Assad, Russia, and Iran have no interest in peace.
So no interest in peace there, Russia and Iran, according to Nikki Haley. Why do you think Washington has made that claim against Moscow and Tehran?
Nikki Haley is a Congress woman with absolutely zero experience of international affairs. And I'm afraid it speaks volumes of Trump's bad judgment that he put this woman in such an important position. But of course, she is just using the material that she's told to use by the security state, which has now made a complete takeover in Washington. What we've seen in the last several weeks has been a putsch. Even Steve Bannon has been kicked off the inner temple of the security state, the National Security Council. That is a very bad sign. Trump has lost the plot. He's now weak. The charges of collusion with Russia have fatally weakened him, and he's now being jerked around. He's having his leash jerked by the intelligence agencies and by the jihadis and the Saudis and others.
There had been great hope in previous weeks and months that actually rebels and the Syrian government would come together and the peace talks would actually lead somewhere this time after so many years of them not doing so. Now we're hearing, for instance, a chief negotiator for the rebels says that hitting one air base is not enough. Is that, how do you say it, is that the expected approach for a member of the peace talks to be taking?
Exactly. Trump, by this action, has raised the hopes of the jihadis that the American cavalry is going to come in, charging over the hill and do their work for them. So why should they be serious about negotiating? What Trump has done has made it less likely that there can be a negotiated outcome, and more likely that there'll be more fighting, more use of chemical weapons.
So you believe it's just going into the hands of the terrorists? They've got what they wanted. You know, the opposition today, we know, former ambassador, is that they are celebrating what is happening here. Islamic State have reportedly taken the opportunity to launch an attack against government forces. It looks to be getting worse, not better, after this strike.
Yes, and let's ask ourselves whether Trump has given the Assad forces and Russia an incentive to work with the Americans against ISIS. No, he's given them a disincentive. I fully expect that Russia will withdraw its cooperation in the fight against ISIS, except insofar as where that suits the Russian Assad agenda.
Former British ambassador to Syria, Peter Ford, always great to get your take. Thank you for coming on the programme.